We're going to be talking this evening about the role and the importance of workplace culture in corporate sustainability and sustainability transformation. And when we talk about workplace culture, we're really talking about corporates, multinationals, large corporations, but also SMEs, really any kind of business. We're delighted to have on the panel today Oliver Haas, Head of Sustainability, Commercial and Innovation at Cathay Pacific. Rebekah Bradley, Business Development Director at Slowood, Greenroot. And Charlotte Lafitte, Managing Director and Co-founder of Green Office Project. I'm Rasheed Shroff, your moderator and perhaps antagonist for the evening. I'm the founder and owner of Banyan Workspace and Dragonfly Asia Pacific. And I'm incredibly grateful to the three of you for joining us tonight, all of you in the audience for being here, and to 1880, the team, Eugenia, Nadia, Samantha, and everyone else for putting this together and allowing us to speak. We have reserved some time at the end of the panel discussions for Q&A. If I could ask you to please hold your questions till then, that would be much appreciated, and we'll make sure we get to that. So before we dive in, perhaps I could ask each of our panelists to just take 2 minutes to introduce yourself, what you do and what your company does. Maybe Bex, starting with you.
Sure. Hi, I'm Rebekah. I'm the Business Development Director at Slowood and Greenroot. So you probably know of Slowood. It's a zero waste and sustainable lifestyle and grocery store. I haven't found a way to say that in a shorter sentence yet. But we have 5 stores in Hong Kong, and it's a place where we essentially sell sustainable alternatives to conventional items and other zero waste and sustainable products. We have 5 stores and 1 online, and then we have Greenroot, which is the B2B arm of our business. So around 90% of the products in Slowood, we are actually the exclusive distributor for. So it essentially means we work directly with all of the brands to consolidate, import, warehouse, sell those products to Slowood, and then to other businesses too, corporates, other supermarkets. We have a wide range of products, so we work with a weirdly diverse group of B2B customers as well. As Business Development Director, my job is, it feels like everything. I'll put on any hat that I'm asked to put on, very much across the whole company. Yeah, Ollie?
Awesome, thanks Rebekah. Yes, so I'm Ollie. I work for Cathay Pacific. I'm assuming most of us here know what Cathay Pacific is. But maybe to give you guys a sense of what sustainability means in the Cathay Pacific space, I think we'll have some time to unpack that a little bit more with relation to aviation. But Cathay Pacific is actually Cathay Group encapsulates not only airlines, but of course also a catering service, a cargo terminal, ground services, and even a laundry service, right? So there's a whole host of sustainability activity and considerations that go on across those businesses. I myself am part of our group sustainability department, and I look after actually a new team, a new function called Commercial and Innovation. And what we're looking at is really looking at ways to empower our customers with sustainable travel options today, but also leveraging Cathay's strength to help direct industry innovation for tomorrow. And so that means we're working both with nearer term solutions around sustainability and around reducing emissions, but also keeping an eye on some of the bigger stuff, the transformative stuff that's happening in the industry. So yeah, maybe just good to know is I'm a massive aviation nerd, and I care a lot about the future of our planet and our species, so that's why I'm in this very role, yeah.
Good evening, everyone. So I'm Charlotte. I'm the Managing Director of the Green Office Project. We are helping companies to transition when it comes to sustainability, with a focus on team education, on different sustainability principles, and another focus on the workplace operations. We also run Banyan Workspace, which is a sustainable co-working space, and we've actually see every day the potential of the workplace on influencing behaviors of their users.
Thank you. So, guys, I guess let's start by asking what's being done and what are the key challenges businesses face in transitioning from what is perhaps perceived as working today, finance KPIs, operational KPIs, to a more sustainable way of doing things. Ollie, perhaps as someone who, as you said, is passionate about sustainability and passionate about aviation, and now in a very specific role at Cathay Pacific where the two intersect, perhaps from your perspective, maybe tell us about the challenges you see business facing.
Sure, maybe I'll answer from a personal perspective first, and then can sort of think about that in the Cathay context. In a personal sense, I'm like the world's biggest hypocrite, right? I love flying. I'm a little kid. I turn into a little kid when I get into a plane. But also really sort of fundamentally, I believe in in the benefits that aviation drives into the world, right? In terms of connecting people, cultures, ideas, right? And so to some extent, the big question in my field in aviation is like, can it be sustainable, right? And how can we continue essentially reaping those benefits of being able to fly around the world in a way that aligns with our future trajectory as well. And I think, so what's healthy for me to remember, or kind of, maybe I'll say this in a different way, what gets me up in the morning is that actually it's not a question of technology anymore, right? This used to be kind of the case, right, is there wasn't really a lot you could do beyond burning jet fuel in an aircraft to move people, to move 300 people over oceans at a time. But now, actually, what's interesting is there's been significant development on the technology front. There's great line of sight to being able to curb aviation emissions with these technologies. And now it's really about sort of bringing the pieces together, right? It's about the policy, engaging customers, building the right incentives, building the right structures and cases to kind of make these things scale and happen, right? But so that's sort of how I look at the opportunity space today. It's no longer an impossibility to make aviation more sustainable. I hesitate to use the word sustainable, but a lot needs to happen to kind of make things scale, right? So I can talk more about the technologies, but I'll stop talking for a sec.
Can I ask a question? Fundamentally, I think that what you said probably applies to most businesses. So what do you see as the challenges between getting from we need to do this to actually doing it?
I think you're absolutely, and I agree, right, is not only most businesses, but most industries, right? You can kind of paint the same pictures. We often have, I'm also a little Peter Pan, right? So this is kind of how I look at the world. But we often have a solution space ready. It's just not knowing how to get there, just like you said, Rasheed, right? Again, from the aviation context, the biggest challenge is actually cost, right? Let me just give you an example, right? So sustainable aviation fuels, these are one of the key technologies I mentioned. Sustainable aviation fuels are fuels that are made from renewable resources, and they are processed to have basically the same qualities as jet fuel. So what that means is you can use them in existing aircraft, you can use them in existing infrastructure, but they can help you reduce life cycle emissions by up to 80%, depending on what you're using to make those fuels, right? But today, sustainable fuels are anywhere between sort of 2 to 5 times the cost of jet fuel. And jet fuel is like 40%, 30 to 40% the cost of an airline. So introducing a solution like that comes at a significant cost, right? And so that is basically the biggest challenge I'd say we would face, right, is that there's a huge green premium in aviation. There's a huge green premium in a lot of other industries. And what we need to do as Cathay is, I could talk a bit more about this later too, is we set ambitious targets, which we honestly stand to. But what I think that allows us to do is, given our strength and our position and our brand and our reputation, our partners and our enablement, is that we can kind of help to send a signal to try to shift the needle on some of these things, right? In the case of sustainable fuel, it's generally a question of scalability. We need to produce more of it. We need more plants. That'll help bring the cost down, right? And that's where we can kind of play a role, right?
Thank you. Bex and Charlotte, if I can call you guys and your businesses solution providers, from your interactions with businesses and individuals, what are the challenges and resistances that you've seen in getting businesses to adopt sustainable practices and solutions? Maybe starting with you, Bex.
So I'm on the other side, and I work with many Ollies, the people who are within the corporates who care and are hands-on with the changes that are happening. And one of the challenges I face is that these corporates are so big. One of the corporates that I work with has over 500,000 staff across Hong Kong and Southeast Asia. And we want to implement something, but they're so big and their teams are so siloed that I'm working with this person in the purchasing department and they can't even connect me with the marketing team. Like they don't know who that is, they don't work with them. And I think often with these new technologies or these disruptive products or brands that we're trying to launch, we need everyone involved because it isn't just a put it on the shelf and it'll sell. It's like we need a proper strategy around this because it just needs a little more effort. Like it needs everyone involved. So how, it kind of turns back into a question to you, Ollie, but is that a challenge for you, like getting everyone in the corporate on board? And how are you working more cross-functionally than you have in your previous roles? How do you do this? How can you help me?
No, I completely agree, right? It's fundamentally, like you said, a lot of new sustainability initiatives cut across. They don't fit in one box, one department, one team. And maybe I can just speak to sort of how we're structured is, I think the other thing that's true across most businesses is sustainability teams are small, right, in big companies. And so inherently, that is a huge part of what our job is, right, is as a team not to be the sustainability team, but actually to play the role of empowering other teams to make sustainability-led decisions, but also to help connect the dots where they need to be connected. So I think often we might get thrown a challenge which naturally does cut across, right, which naturally can't just fit in the purchasing team or into the marketing team or needs that like slice across and needs also the like sustainability integrity to evaluate it, right? So I guess I'd just say keep knocking on the door of the sustainability department because that's where you'll find at least the other members of the choir probably, right?
Yeah. I think it sounds, I'd say sometimes that works. It depends. I mean, the answer is always it depends, right? Sometimes that works. Sometimes the sustainability team really is just, it's just the sustainability team, like, they're trying to get us to do all these things. There's so many pieces of the puzzle to work with, and I've found, I guess, that with these challenges, my learnings over the past year, I'd say, is that I think there needs to just be a way bigger top-down approach. Like if the person at the top doesn't care, nothing truly impactful is going to happen. There's just going to be a lot of weak efforts, small leverage made that fails to make changes. So, yeah, I think on my side, there's only so much I can do to try and make change and work with these big companies. And I think knocking on heaps of doors is what my strategy is right now.
Not easy. Charlotte, from your perspective, what are the challenges that you've seen in terms of getting your solutions implemented?
Some challenges we face, especially pushing sustainability education, like a lot of different things, it's always budget and time. Budget because our solutions doesn't fall in a proper bucket from companies, like either it's sustainability budget, Is it learning and development budget? So it's hard to find the right person first to get in touch with. Same for the workplace operations solutions. And ultimately time. We are offering the possibility to upskill and raise awareness, engage employee about sustainability. It requires time. Like most of our workshops are longer than 2 hours. They don't always have the time allocated for that. It requires a lot of commitment from the company to allocate this time from the employees to learn about sustainability. So that's the two main challenges I think we're facing amongst others also. I don't know how you feel about that.
I think what's interesting is you guys are all talking about navigating the corporate structure and how difficult that can be at times, whether it's budget, whether it's people, whether it's different responsibilities with different departments. I guess a follow-on question is, do you guys fundamentally believe that it's the role of corporates to educate on climate change and drive sustainability for the planet, or what would you say to people who say that it's the role of government, our education system, and maybe sort of corporate bodies to drive this? And where does corporate sort of fit into this? Anyone who wants to take the question.
Yeah, I think everyone has a role to play in education and raising awareness about what's going on and what can actually help us get out of this situation. And one piece of the structure will be the education system that, yes, should focus on youth and build new generation with the right mindset and a different lifestyle. I think government has a role to play and should focus on the public to help us get to new habits. We can list waste management, for example, and recycling. Like, people need to understand why it's important and how to do it. And I think that's definitely the role of the government. And then on the other side, I think businesses, they have sometimes the resources to actually fill the skill gap that we face right now, because in a company, the decision makers, they are usually from our generation and above, and they didn't learn anything about sustainability at the university. Like, just for my example, I had 1 hour of CSR per week, and this was a new course. And this was the first time that I heard about environment of our community in my curriculum at 20 years old. So how do you basically help these people to make the right decision when they are not aware of what are the sustainable principles? And I think then, yes, businesses, companies have a role to play here to make sure every single decision maker across different departments can make the right decision that can help us.
I'd agree with that, and I think also, like, you know, with great power comes great responsibility, right? I think to some extent this is how, I'm not putting us on a pedestal, but this is how we see it at Cathay. This is, you can go and see this in the public domain, our kind of company strategy on a page, right? The single thing that drives basically every key decision in the company. One big thing that happened there, to your point, Bex, is they included a sustainability leadership ambition on this core strategy. And that means that every team now is excited and shuffling and interested to see how they can make that happen with their own context. I think that's kind of the power of business, right? The other power of business in many of the contexts we're talking about, I guess, is you have, even though it takes a long time to knock on a bunch of doors, right? When you do get that one big order from a corporation of 500,000 employees, like, that's a needle shift, right? Is if we can figure out a way to, or we have our ambition to hit 10% sustainable fuel by 2030, that's a needle shift, right? And so I think that's the power that a corporate can play. And ultimately, you know, I believe in change from bottom and from the top. We need that from the top too, but I guess companies are an interface, right, between kind of regulation and people. And I don't want to say the consumer. I don't like that, but people, right? Yeah.
Yeah. I think in an idealistic world, I would just say government, like solely government. If the government just changed all the rules overnight, changed policies and regulations, and there were incentives and there were funding, like we could get change really, really fast. That's not going to happen. And we need to be really realistic about it. And I think often when we have these conversations with people in sustainability, it can be a bit like, you know, we need to be doing more, it needs to be happening faster, but in reality it's just not. And so the answer is always going to be, it's multifaceted, it's really complex. We need governments, we need companies, we need everyone involved, and as you said, it needs to be top down. Like if the CEO isn't interested in a triple bottom line, then the government, you know, brings one little thing in and they'll make that one change that they need to make, but nothing else. Like there really needs to be strong leaders all over the place. And so, yeah, it starts with education, and it starts with KPIs and policies within companies, and then the government's also coming in and making all the bad guys do it too. Yeah.
So people in general, I feel, hold companies accountable for operating more sustainably. And I'm just curious, we're talking about whether governments should mandate it or whether companies should act proactively and do this. It must be difficult for companies when people are holding them accountable for sustainability and to operate more sustainably, but still expecting the companies to provide the same level of service, the same level of quality. How do you guys see that? Do you feel that it's fair that companies are held accountable in this way for sustainability, education, and operating more sustainably?
So I'm going to step out of the Cathay role for just a second, because I mean we've talked a lot about the big corporate, right? But actually, I'm in a big corporate because I love aviation, right? Generally, most of my work has been in much smaller businesses, and like the type of business I'm most excited about or believe strongest in terms of being an agent of change is what I call the protagonist business, right? Now, these are some controversial examples, but I'm still going to put them out there, right? The Ben & Jerry's, the Patagonia, in early days, the Tesla. I think these types of businesses, they exist to show that things can be done differently, right? And generally what that does is when you know, in early days, you know when, I don't know, Nike has its sustainability board meeting, they're probably having a discussion of how to be more like Patagonia, right? The whole story of why Unilever bought Ben & Jerry's was basically to learn from the ethos of that business, and particularly also, its social environmental values. And so I think you can use, there often exists in many industries like this protagonist, or at least reference cases or case studies that act as like an inspiration and prove that something can work. Now, that might work only at a very small scale. It may only address a very small niche of customers. Those things are all true. I'm not like only idealistic. But I think I really enjoy when I see those examples that manage to strike that balance. I think they usually send a signal for the rest of an industry, right? I don't know whether.
Yeah, it's like that needle. Those are the needle shifts as well, as you said, right? I think that it's the question maybe is less like do they have that responsibility? I think we're in a time now where it's like more so it's actually beneficial, not just for the environment. It's beneficial in hiring like talent. The younger generation, young millennials, Gen Z, and the others to come, there's studies that show that they're looking at this now when they're choosing which companies they want to work for, and they want to see that they are genuinely doing things in a sustainable way, or that they have a sustainability report. So it is about, it's not just for the benefit of the earth, it's for the benefit of the company and yeah, having a strong team and doing things the right way in that sense. So yeah, I think it's a bit broader than that.
Maybe I'm going a bit off track here, but as you talk, I'm just thinking that companies, as they go into sustainability transition, they need to learn, whether it's like from the top or the bottom, or everyone has to learn, and it's basically going back to that phase where you are actually willing to fail. Yeah. But for a big company, like the bigger the company is, it's actually super difficult to do because you have all the eyes on you. So how do you manage through that phase of, yeah.
So for businesses looking to make a sustainable transition, it's a journey. And we're all on this journey. And someone far more eloquent than me said, a journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. As we think about corporates with a genuine desire to transition to a more sustainable way of doing business, how do you think small changes and actions within the workplace help address major issues? And if you have any examples, I'd love to hear that. And maybe Charlotte and Bex, maybe you guys could kick this one off as sort of solutions providers.
Yeah. I'll say this. Our environment is constantly influencing our decision all the time. We don't even sometimes realize it. I'll take a simple example. If you have a food counter in front of you offering some food, if there is only junk food on the counter, you'll pick junk food. If there is half junk and half healthy, then you'll start to think about it. And if there is only healthy food on it, then you'll pick healthy food. So it's just a very simple example to show you that actually the environment influences every single decision that you make. And we've seen it at Banyan. All of these little options that you give to people to make the right decision helps. So we can take recycling as an example for sustainability. Well, if you have a recycling station at the office or elsewhere, then you're more likely to recycle than if there isn't. If it's clean, if the signage is clear, if it's explained you well how to do it, even more likely to proceed this way. And it can seem a little bit simple and small improvement, but actually when you think about it and when you're surrounded with a lot of different solutions that is offered to you like that, then you start to plant seed in people's mind and it grows. And just to give some example, like success example, quick wins we see at Banyan is the members that use the space, yes, at some point they recycle, they use the reusable lunch boxes, and they start to ask questions. You can see that it's actually growing in their mind, and they're like, want to learn about recycling, or maybe small things like where can I buy rechargeable batteries, but it also links to their business. And oh, do you know a supplier that is actually plastic free or has a better solution for me? So it's not, how to say, it's a long time thing. It's not gonna happen in one day. We're talking about changing mindset and behavior, but I guess it's influencing.
I think those small steps as well can be a bit of an iceberg. Like with what Charlotte and I offer, Charlotte is offering education to corporates, and on our side we offer corporate like zero waste snacks and sustainable corporate gifting. And it's not, okay, a company of 200 people will be saving around 4 kgs of plastic a year, you know, as the alternative would be individually packaged gummy bears. They're now buying bulk gummy bears from us with no packaging. 4 kgs, great, but not shifting the needle. It's not hugely contributing to their KPIs. Directly, indirectly, we've found it is. So I've been speaking to a few of our existing company snacking clients recently, and the same feedback has been echoed across them, which is the change that it has had in their company culture. So their staff are now seeing that the sustainability team and the brand in general are really, really trying and really caring, even in the office where none of their customers can see. So they now have zero waste snacks in the pantry. They've said that their teams are feeling more like they believe in the ethos. It's not just a marketing thing. It's not just something that we're doing in stores. They now see that this is something that the brand is doing throughout the whole company. And they've found that their teams have felt inspired by that. And that's not just them saying it either. These companies that we work with have done internal surveys and seen like a hard change from a 1-star to a 5-star in terms of what the company thinks in terms of, what the staff think in terms of how well the company is doing when it comes to sustainability. So I think it creates a ripple effect in that sense, with the staff feeling like it's real and this is something that the company actually cares about. Therefore, maybe it's something that I should care about and be implementing in my work as well. They're also seeing, that small change can make a big impact in terms of getting everyone on board. One of the other things they'd done is they were trying to get the HR team to ask in interviews questions around, how sustainably minded people are, even if they're not applying for a role that's within sustainability. And HR were really resistant to that, and they just didn't do it. But then HR saw the snacks in the kitchen, and were like, oh, the operations team have done their part, maybe I should do my part too. And so that visibility actually started to affect the other teams as well. So it's just a way of helping get everyone on board. It's not just about that 4 kgs of plastic saving a year.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, Ollie, actually. There's a lot of things that you can do before Cathay goes 100% sustainable aviation fuel. So what are those small steps, and how are they influencing the culture and the commitments that Cathay has?
Yeah, I love that. And I think, we have, maybe there's an internal company and a customer answer that question. And I think you guys really represented the internal company side of it. I very much agree with what you both said. But it parallels really nicely into the customer side. What's really interesting in aviation is that the biggest changes you make are the least visible, right? So anything you do to tackle emissions in aviation, the customer can't see. They can't touch, they can't smell, they can't feel, right? If I put 10% sustainable fuel into the wing of the aircraft, you don't feel that. If I make the aircraft lighter, you don't feel that. If I make the engine 20% more efficient, you don't feel that, right? And so actually, to be very honest with you, my perspective on this question has actually changed. Where I have an engineering background, right? So kind of I have equal parts romantic and analytical sides to my brain. But when I think about sort of tackling the climate challenge, my kind of analytical brain says, where's the needle going to shift, right? Like tackle the big problem, that's what matters most. In the case of aviation, its emissions is the biggest part of our impact, right? But actually, the conversation starter, or your initial step up the iceberg, or as you said, the option that starts making you aware of other options, in our case, is actually everything that the customer feels, right? So when we do engagement surveys, overwhelmingly we hear back that customers really, they get excited about our economy class blanket, which is made from recycled plastic. They get excited about our efforts to reduce single-use plastic, which have been a big ongoing topic for us in the cabin. They get excited about, at least sustainability aligned customers will get excited about plant-based meals offering. So these things are actually incredibly valuable, right? Because they are the conversation starter. They are the way to start engaging the customer. And it's complex to do this, but I think there's a way to bridge everything all those tangible pieces to the kind of bigger intangible story that also needs to be solved, right? but you kind of move the customer with these experiential pieces.
So you guys are obviously doing a lot. You're very passionate about sustainability. Times are exceptionally tough for many businesses. Things are harder than ever for so many, and so priorities for a lot of people are to stay alive, to make payroll, to achieve quarterly targets or cost-cutting quotas. Take the F&B industry here in Hong Kong, and all the news about how difficult things are and how many restaurants are closing. Can companies like this, in your opinion, genuinely be expected to prioritize sustainability among their other business challenges and objectives? How do you feel about that? Maybe Bex, do you want to take that?
I feel very passionate about this question. Yes, I think one of the most annoying things in my job, and something that I hear all the time, is people in Hong Kong don't care about sustainability. It's just not true. And like, I don't know if this will work in this room, but I'm going to ask 2 questions. Put your hand up if you are an eco-warrior. You are 100% plastic-free, you recycle, you compost, you have a reusable bottle, like all of these things. Put your hand up if you think you're in like the top 10% of that. That's awesome, well done. It's not many, right? I didn't even put my hand up. I work at Slowood. Put your hand up if you do 1 of those things, or 2 of those things, or 3 of those things. Okay? See, no, good. Okay. We care a little bit. It's not black and white. It's not people don't care or people do care. People care enough. And there's data that shows that people care enough to make the change. There's data in Hong Kong that shows people will pay a little bit more. I can't remember the number. It's like 7% more or something for a sustainable alternative to a conventional product. Data, that's you can Google it. It's real data. It's not about, and I also think it's not about people caring or not even. It's about giving people the option, and right now we don't have the option. I work with all of the main modern trade retailers in Hong Kong, and they are so resistant to putting these products on the shelf, even when the price is the same or very slightly higher than the conventional alternative, because people in Hong Kong don't care about sustainability. And we just won't get past that first part. Research shows that if you put a product on the shelf next to a conventional alternative, people are more likely to buy it than if it's over there in the eco section or over there in Slowood. We need accessibility and we need better prices, and we can only get better prices if the big guys are going to try and take a risk and allow economies of scale to work to bring the prices down. And I think right now I haven't experienced that happening. I haven't experienced these risks being taken. And even with data from Slowood showing what products sell and how well they sell, there's still a lot of resistance. So I think there's money. I think there's money to be made. I don't think we're putting these products on the shelf to tick a box. I want to work for a sustainable company, but I want to make money as well. I just want to do it in a good way. And so I'm not ever pitching these products to tick a box. I genuinely believe that they will sell and that there is money to be made. That's in my industry. It's different. I'm sure it's not the same for every single company, but I think in most companies we can find ways where sustainable changes are actually cost saving or not that hard to make, or can actually add a lot of value to the company outside of just the bottom line.
I agree with you, and I would also, in a different perspective highlight that you and I are working for companies that provide sustainable solution. But I think that for other companies, it might be difficult to put sustainability on the priority and on top of the agenda. Business has to survive, and that's something I can feel with a lot of conversation, in a lot of conversation we have with our clients. But I think that in order to survive in the long term, sustainability has to be somewhere in this agenda, and it has to climb. But it really requires companies and people inside to understand that this is a long-term game. When actually I feel that today business as usual focus on short-term strategy and perspective most of the time. I don't know what you think about it, Oli.
I'd echo the last point. I mean, I think you're right. Maybe the question's a little different for size of business. I don't know whether I fully stand to this, but you know, if you're a small mom and pop shop trying to make ends meet, that question may arise. Although sort of at my core, I believe in what Rebekah said. It's like I don't believe the objective of, you know, running a sustainable business should come at the cost of dropping sustainability as a priority. That's kind of why I'm where I am. But I think from a big corporate, it's entirely what you said, right? It's like, it's actually about, it's a long-term target. And that's when we talk about top-down and leadership support, like that's what you have to sign on to, right? Is within the fluctuating, crazy world that's going to happen in between what you're committing to, or at least, you know, hopefully what your sustainability vision is naturally going to be 5, 10, 20, 30, 50 years out, right? And so I think it's about keeping that mindset alive even when things get tough, right? And there's maybe analogies, right, of businesses, for example, that are incredibly customer focused and still keep that customer experience and focus alive when things get tough. I think that's the kind of mindset, right, is it needs to anchor into the business even as the world goes crazy around it, right? And there'll maybe ups, maybe downs. But it's idealistic. I respect that.
It's interesting. We talked a lot about how sustainability has to be top-down during these discussions. And I'm curious, because you know, statistics suggest that 70% of organizational change initiatives fail. And honestly, having worked in a large multinational and with smaller companies, that number really didn't surprise me, because I've seen initiatives fail, and sustainability is an initiative for a lot of companies, or it's starting to become an initiative. For a sustainability transition to succeed, I'd suggest that the team needs to be emotionally brought in, and everyone on the team has a role to play. I mean, the C-suite are not deciding what snacks to stock in the pantry in a company of 500,000 people. Maybe they should be. But how do you see the role of the wider team within a company in driving these sustainability transitions and making sure that these organizational change initiatives actually succeed? Maybe do you want to start, Ollie?
Yeah, I mean, I think yes, the passion and the love has to start from there. And again, actually, fundamentally, that's the change agent I believe in, right? Is the team and those that are rolling their sleeves up and making it happen. I think when we, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think our tendency as we're talking about top-down is perhaps talking about scaling, right? And so I think often a lot of these initiatives, in fact, start with the team who decides to stock their pantry with, zero waste snacks, or starts with the manager that decides that he or she wants to make those snacks available for their team. And that can become a cascading signal. But for that to turn into a larger kind of dialogue and a larger commitment, I do admit, I think that then needs to come from the top. And maybe my kind of analogy here is to other other sort of genuine movements within corporates, things like the diversity and inclusion movement, right? I think can start off in a very similar way. It might be that group that meets for lunch and says, we want to organize a small event, or we want to send a signal, or we want to bring in a speaker, or we want to do something. And that group is the passion that might, the groundswell that might start things. But eventually it does have to come back to the top, right? I think it needs to meet from both sides. That's kind of how I see it.
Yes, but I would say that it has to come from the top the right way as well. Like if there is solutions like adding sustainability into the KPIs of the employee and things like that. But I feel that if you force employee, you will get short-term results again, but I don't think it will go any further. I think something else that can come from the top and from the leaders is company culture, company purpose, mission, and I feel if everyone in the team feels part of something bigger, as echoing what you were saying earlier, like if they feel their colleague is actually also working on something else, if they are interested about it, if they know what we are talking about, if they know why it's important, if they feel that the management is actually believing in a sustainable business and in a sustainable future for their business. Like you mentioned Patagonia as an example. I think everybody knows that the founder live and breathe with sustainability values for his business, and that's probably why people want to work there. So I think the culture piece that I agree as well should come from the top is super important on top of maybe KPIs or target and goals that are also super important, but maybe in a gradual way as well, and try to go step by step. Like earlier at Rethink, people were sharing their annual target, and we met the target, and now we are looking at doing even better, and it just shows a progress, and it shows people that it's actually possible, that there is progress. If we see this as a revolution, I think it might scare a lot of people.
Don't get me wrong, I'm all for passion and revolution, and I think we need these people. I think we're these people. You need those people in the company, but I think what also works is bonuses or money. Money talks. Money makes people do, makes people achieve these goals. If there is an incentive or it's a KPI, it's something that this team or this person must achieve this quarter, or you don't get your bonus, or you won't get promoted, or whatever it is. I think there needs, these KPIs, these reviews that companies have are really important in getting these changes across the line. It would be great if every single person in the whole company cared about sustainability, and we've said everyone cares a little bit, but they probably don't care enough to truly make change in their job every single day. But if they have a KPI, I think they're more likely to. That's what I see as happening more so now, and it does start from the top with a CEO or C-suite coming in who is implementing that structure throughout the whole company. I don't think any change is going to happen unless people are properly incentivized in that sense, in addition to building that company ethos and culture all around it as well. But I think there has to be some hard structure in there too.
It's interesting. So we're saying that to empower teams, we need it to be top down. We need it to be in their goals. We need it to be perhaps financially incentivized. But it also needs to, it needs to be top down, but also bottom up at the same time, and it meets somewhere in the middle. I'm kind of curious. I want to go back to some of the discussion we had earlier about small changes, and I wanted to to ask you guys. Ollie, you kind of hinted at this when you said that the big changes that have perhaps the biggest results are not always visible to the consumer or to the person on the street. We also talked about the importance of small changes, and I'm wondering, from your guys' perspective, can we get a little bit of insight on, can small changes really bring meaningful impact to the sustainability, I guess, reporting of a company or the sustainability initiatives and how a company goes about achieving the goals that they've set? I really wanted to look at these small changes and kind of understand from you guys, are they really making the impact, or do we need to be doing these bigger things that you talked about earlier that are not so visible?
I've had a conversation about this yesterday on a Women in Climate WhatsApp group that Charlotte and I are both in. And in this chat, I was misunderstood, I think. And I said small changes can make a big impact if we take them together. I think small changes can make an impact. And by small, I by no means mean weak or fake. They need to be genuine steps, and you need to keep walking. It's not one step. One of my biggest pet peeves is when a company asks to work with us on Earth Day, and only Earth Day. That's just one great step, but it's not actually a change. It's not doing anything. And as I've said as well, it's not saying anything to the rest of the company. It's not saying we truly care. It's saying, oh, we have to do this thing on one day. So I think the small steps, they make a difference, and we've talked about that iceberg as well. But like Ollie, with what you're doing, you said it, the fuel is 5 to 7 times more expensive right now. What's the goal? Is it to have 10%, or is there a long-term plan here that's in place? Because I think that's what's most important. I'm all for changes. But it needs to be genuine, and it needs to be long-term. There needs to be a long-term game here, and there needs to be a goal in the end, not just siloed little changes all over the place that aren't actually adding up to anything or growing over time.
Yeah, I think small changes matter a lot to me too. As I was sort of saying before, I want to go back to something Charlotte said, which is very valuable, right? Is like, when you want to make change, you also have to be ready to fail, right? And I do think, in general, in sustainability, in most contexts, companies are too scared to try something big and fail, right? Because the stakes seem so high. Hey, we tried this big transformation. We tried this massive change of a material in our or some change in our process. It massively failed. We're emitting 2 times more than we did. But we're going to try and roll it back and fix it, is not really a story you can tell in sustainability. It's a story you can tell in like digital innovation, right? We rolled out a new product or a new credit card, and it failed, and it's cool. We learned from it. We're doing the next thing. So I think that's super key, which like builds to this tendency of saying like, all right, let's do like the small things that feel safe. I think that's true of individuals as well as companies, right? It's like, all right, like all these overwhelming things that I need to do to change my sustainable lifestyle, let me take these small steps, but I don't take the big swings. And I think that has to do with the failure thing too, right? That's the sort of flip side of that. So I believe small steps make a difference. I would probably just, your point inspired me. I would probably state that the other thing I believe in is we should be ready to fail, even when our stakes are high, right? Because big attempts can also lead to big changes, right? That's sort of my thought.
A question to you is, why would make it easy for you to fail as a company like Cathay?
In our case, I would say right now it's not easy to fail, right? We have regulatory pressure on us, right? We have media attention on us, and I think in our industry in particular, because we're a hard to abate industry, like I actually don't think there's a lot of that room, right? That doesn't mean that there's not a lot of innovation and awesome stuff happening ahead that'll solve the challenges we're trying to solve. But I don't think we have a lot of leeway within this to fail. And just one very practical example you could see is airlines are being held under the loop for greenwashing, right? And some of the cases, some of the criticisms I actually agree with, some I don't, right? Like one of the things that I believe in is I want to be able to tell the story. I want to be able to bridge the intangible to the tangible. I want to be able to engage a customer more in the sustainability journey and speak with a very genuine voice to say, we're not there yet today, but like, here's what we're trying, right? Or here's an option for you. And it's not perfect, but it's better. You don't really have the space to say that within current regulation. You need to be very careful, right? And so I don't have kind of a solution for this, but I'd say that we are particularly in an industry where there's not a lot of room or not a lot of buffer to sort of fail on that point, right?
So the idea that we're failing because we're scared to fail is interesting. I'm curious, Ollie, from your perspective and from your personal perspective, what do you see as the future for aviation as a whole? It's a big question, and I don't know how you can answer it succinctly, but I'm sure that as someone who's passionate about sustainability and passionate about aviation, it's something that you've spent some time thinking about. What do you see as the future of aviation?
So controversially, I will say I believe we'll continue flying, and I believe we'll continue flying more, right? That's actually why I believe in sustainable aviation, because as I told you, I believe that should happen, right? I believe flying should also become more democratized. The future of aviation technologically is going to look a little bit like the renewable energy space, where there's not a single solution that will replace coal. It's a combination of solutions depending on where you are and depending on the context that'll build towards our renewable energy mix. And in aviation, it's a combination of sustainable fuels, hydrogen aircraft, and electric aircraft. And basically, they will play a role based on distance that you fly, right? The shorter distances that you fly will, over time, become possible to fly with more electrified aircraft and hydrogen-powered aircraft. For long distances, to get from here to Los Angeles, you're going to be using sustainable fuels, right? So it's going to be a combination of solutions, which means that looks very different from the picture of today. You need different infrastructure, you need fundamentally different types of aircraft that operate in very different ways to kind of make this work. But I'll go back to say that it's technologically possible, right? And the future of aviation is also going to require a lot of regulatory change, right? And a lot of incentives to make that transition happen in any form of affordable way. But I do think that there's a fundamental value to aviation that most people, most governments actually hold in high regard. So I'm an optimist, as you can probably tell. I do believe that needle will shift. It's very, very hard to shift.
So, guys, final question from me. For each of you, what's your big hope and what do you want to achieve in your current roles over the next 12 months? Charlotte, do you want to start with that one?
Yes. I hope that more people stand out for sustainability messages in their own company, because I know that when you're in a meeting room and it's business as usual, it's not always easy to say, hey, what about this? What about plastic free? Or what about something else? I will quote Simon Sinek that say, be the leader you wish you had, and I think this is true for sustainability in business, and it will only lead to positive outcomes, I'm sure. As for what I want to achieve, we build a great solution, holistic solution for sustainability education, incorporate and integrating sustainability to the culture, and I want to show companies that this is working and that they should all go for that.
Awesome.
I guess my next 12 months is I want to get more customers excited about what more sustainable travel options look like. And in the spirit of little steps is I don't actually care if that customer group is small, but I want to make customers more aware of what they can do to travel more sustainably. And then given the industry I'm in, I'll also give an answer for the next 12 years, or maybe beyond, is to use, again, kind of Cathay's position and its reputation and its influence to help advance the innovation towards zero-emission flight.
Over the last 12 months, I think I've really learned how important system structures are and how little impact I have in my current role on those. I would like to learn more about how I can have more of an impact and create more leverage in making these changes within corporates or within the other supermarkets we work with. My vision is for Slowood to not be the only store that you can buy alternatives from. I do really believe that sustainable alternatives to conventional products being made more accessible is not only going to help the bottom line, but help create that shift in the consumer's behavior, and they're seeing it as something that's normal. There needs to be a conscious shift, and there's so many parts to play that are going to make that happen. But for me, I just really like, in 1 year, I'd just like to get one really good product on the shelf outside of Slowood in another major retailer. I think that would be one move that would shift the needle, and I can then, like you said, Charlotte, as well, work with these bigger companies, get bigger data, and lower the risk. They're so risk adverse right now, so lower that barrier for them and make them feel like these changes are safer. Reporting, analyzing, getting data, and making this whole pitch a lot stronger, and trying to convince others that it's a good thing to do.
Just before we go to Q&A, Bex, I want to ask you one more question. Something you mentioned earlier about the importance of sustainability in terms of recruitment. My sense is that people entering the workforce today are far more conscious than the people who are already in the workforce. And I'm just curious about your sort of observations or thoughts on how much sustainability in the corporate world is going to impact companies' ability to hire talent, and what it means to this new generation of young professionals, and whether you had anything you wanted to add to that earlier, because I thought it was a very interesting point about the long-term importance for corporations to operate more sustainability and have a sustainability roadmap.
I think I've contradicted myself a bit here, though. One part I've said just incentivize them, give them KPIs. The reality is, I think it's twofold. The corporates do need to attract, if they want to attract talent and the best people for these roles, these people are there are people who care, even if you're an accountant or a sales admin. You're not directly making sustainable changes within the company, but more people are having more of an opinion, or they have more care on the greater ethos of the whole company, regardless of if they're actually making a direct impact in their role. People want to feel like more people are wanting to feel like they're working for a company that's doing good. I think with flying, for example, as well, I'm not going to not fly because it's going to increase my personal carbon emissions. I'm going to fly anyway. I'm not going to not stay in a nice hotel because, you usually don't find out until you get there, like how sustainable they are, for example. But for a lot of people, they do these things, they fly, and then they find out, oh, it's actually way more sustainable than it used to be, or that the company's been able to tell me how much lower my carbon footprint was because of this new technology that they're using, and I feel good about that. And I think it's similar with corporates. People might not be directly making that decision, but they're going to feel good about it. So regardless if it's someone who really, really cares or it's someone who doesn't really care, in the end, it's just going to make everyone feel better. So yeah, and then on the other side, for people who don't care or in those other roles, I still think incentives and KPIs are really important.
Do you guys want to add anything, or should we go to Q&A?
Maybe we'll go to Q&A.
Who's got a question? We'll just get the mics handed out. The gentleman over there.
Hi, I'm Angus. I actually met you all before. Question about how you all navigate what happens when all three of you are pushing sustainability. What happens when your competitors or companies that you're dealing with are undercutting on price? The companies you're dealing with are feeling that price pressure, that price point. Their incentives, as you talked about, are about quarterly results, all that sort of stuff. How do you navigate that when that price pressure and competition comes on? How do you navigate avoiding sustainability becoming the first thing that executives cut or they push by the wayside in order to try and meet what their board's expectations or their owners' expectations are on price and revenues and things like that?
For Slowood, it's very much about the strength of the brand. One of our biggest competitors would probably be iHerb when it comes to supplements and things like chia seeds or quinoa or these bulk products. They're way cheaper on iHerb. Like, we can't compete with that price. It's really crazy. But people do there's so much love for the Slowood brand that has been built, and the in-store experience. I think brick and mortar stores are now playing an interesting role, maybe not always to drive physical sales, but to create this brand experience and to connect with customers on a emotional level and build that relationship. So for us, building the Slowood brand has been really important in that sense, because it's what keeps people coming back. Things like our loyalty app as well, thank you for signing up, download the loyalty app. I think marketing has a really important part to play there in ensuring that there's repeat purchase and people are choosing you over just price every time.
This is not really a direct answer to your question, and I'm flipping it, but I'm telling you I'm flipping it, so hopefully that's okay. I think the other effect that we see is it's healthy to see what competition's doing, not on price maybe, but on sustainability factors, right? So I think it's always good, it's always powerful to be able to build a case to say competitor X has made a certain move. Not that we necessarily have to follow that move, but how can we learn from that move, right? Or they've done it, how might they have structured it? How might they be selling it? So I think that's generally more how we look at competition rather than on the price competition front. Conscious of the fact that this is an idealistic answer, it would still have to complement with, sustainability is a long-term goal, that competitive pressure may be a short-term flux. That's sort of how I think about it. But honestly, from a competitive side, it's more that we can learn, or it's a strong beacon if someone else is doing something that we could be as good at or better at.
Sorry, Rasheed.
Go for it, Charlotte.
I think from my side, it would be more about the client we work with when it comes to competition, and it's the same. It's not so much about pricing, and I'm not so much involved in their pricing strategy, but when it comes to competition, we work with a lot of retailers, for example. So at some point, circularity is something that starts to happen more and more with some brands. So second hand, or like return your clothes or your shoes. So exactly as you said, they look at it, they watch, and how, and they learn also how they can implement it and communicate about it, I think.
I think one other part to it is maybe similar to what I've just said, but the adding of value around the offering. So like the company snacks, for example, it's not just snacks. People could go to iHerb and maybe they can, or HKTV Mall or wherever, and get the exact same snacks for a cheaper price. But it's not, there's no reverse logistics. It's not circular. And iHerb can't tell them how much plastic they've saved in a whole year and what the equivalent carbon emissions are to that. iHerb haven't partnered with Green Office Project to offer educational workshops in addition to that. The tags that they provide aren't reusable. They don't get a 10% discount. Like, there's all of these other things that I think are important to add on and build out to make your offering more interesting and unique. And like, when it comes to marketing, B2C marketing is very emotive. So yeah, adding on all these special things around it and making the consumer have a stronger connection with the brand than, they don't want to go and spend their money elsewhere because they love you. The goal, I think, for any brand is to have it's not a nice word, but to have a cult following. You want people to choose you. Like, I can only buy Apple iPhones from now on. I can't go Android. And so many people are like that, right? You fall in love with a brand and you can't go anywhere else. So working out how to do that is important.
I think it's a really interesting point that you've both raised about branding and how important that is for the consumer. And, consumers will pay a premium for a brand that they love. I think I'm not saying anything that you don't know, but there's a lot of pressure from even the Hong Kong government on Cathay to reduce prices, but every time I'm on a Cathay flight, it's full. So people are obviously opting for the brand and one of Hong Kong's most loved brands, which I think is really interesting. But I think what you said about flipping it and using competition as a force for change it is also really interesting, or a way to distinguish yourself from the competition. And why you're charging more. Gentleman in the back.
Hi, thank you for sharing. As you know, Hong Kong Stock Exchange, they have very clear listing rules for listed companies anyway. So they have to comply. But for non-listed companies, issues. So when obligations become an option, things don't get done. And very often those can be issues that are quite important. Speaking of failure, as I'm sure Oliver will be aware, Air New Zealand dropped off their 2030 goals. That's a bit of a blow. So I think that to me is a kind of an example of when things are not enforced, things get dropped off. And I think in general, generally speaking, I think many corporates in Hong Kong, they are doing what they can from top down. And I think in a certain level, that's been working. But at the same time, though, it's not about people don't care, but they don't care enough in relative to their jobs. It's not their job, so they don't really execute it. The bins are there, they're just not doing the recycling, they're just not bothered. So it becomes a personal brand that they don't even care about their personal brand, despite the fact that the companies might be doing everything in their power to cultivate that corporate culture. And Hong Kong's not like Scandinavian countries. In Scandinavian countries, being green or sustainability is really deeply rooted in their culture. So my really general question is that for a general office worker on an individual level, what can they do as an ambassador in sustainability? And in generally speaking, where are we headed in Hong Kong in general? In terms of corporate culture?
I can take a stab first, and I think, to be honest, I'd just be tying some threads together from the discussion. Thank you for your question. I I think that lonely office worker has so much, it is such an important person, right? And has so much power. And maybe I'll use kind of Charlotte's words, right? Is like, you know, if that lonely office worker brings in a reusable lunchbox, right? Or, you know, buys zero waste office snacks, or is at least the beacon. I think that's the point I'm trying to make, right? That is the power that one still has, and I think the point you were making is that can influence others, right? And if you demonstrate an action, if you demonstrate that an option is available, if you demonstrate that in your environment you figured out how to recycle your wrappers at the end of the day, that's a signal that can cascade to others, right? So I think that gets back to like the little steps, but those little steps can grow. In terms of the stance of kind of corporate culture in Hong Kong, sure, I don't think that, you know, sustainability is the top topic for most corporates here, but I do believe that, you know, like Rebekah's saying, I don't believe that Hong Kongers are inherently less sustainable as a society or as a culture. I think it's just more about when the incentives start flipping in that direction, right? And when the movement starts, one thing Hong Kongers do is they move fast, right? And Hong Kong consumers in this region move fast. So when the options are available, when the priorities are put in place, I do believe that change happens, right?
Yeah, I just wanted to add on what you were saying is that, like, this worker bringing his reusable lunchboxes, behavior is contagious. So if you see someone doing something, you will most likely do the same at some point. So yes, I would hope for that coworker to push a message of sustainability and invite all of these colleagues to think about it and so on. But if he already just like do his thing, and people may ask questions at some point about it as well. And I think this is where education and awareness comes in, and where it's business responsibility to me is, with some of the workshops we host, we can see that it's actually inspiring people, and that they didn't know that they were interested in that topic because they never bother reading about it or looking at it or watching documentary about it. But when you explain people why it's something important, yeah, you have good surprise sometimes. They might change.
In Slowood, we're a team of 65, and our office is a team of 12. And I am the foreigner. It's a team of a fully local team. They speak Cantonese to each other all day. And it's a reasonably junior team. And in my position, I found that the culture that we have in the office, and I've experienced this in other offices in Hong Kong as well, they're very resistant to managing up. They're very unlikely to share their opinion with me or to the C-suite or upper management. They don't want to be wrong. They don't think their opinion is valued. They don't think it's their place to say anything. So for me, it's been really important to just in general foster a culture where they feel comfortable and they know that they can do that, because they won't. And I've been there 3 years now, and I think that they definitely do speak up a lot more than they did in the beginning. So part of it is more general, and again, maybe that's more top-down, but allowing the more junior staff to speak up is important. If you are just one of those people and you haven't been given that opportunity, then I think it can be really hard to try and impact someone in a higher position. I think it's, creating from top down, creating that, opening that door and allowing people to be heard. And maybe even anonymously. Some of the officers I've spoken to do an anonymous satisfaction survey with their whole team and allow them to ask and answer those sorts of questions without putting their name to it. So they're more likely to be honest, and they're not afraid to share that either. I think it's just outside of that, it's just really encouraging the office workers to speak up and just try make a change. But I think that's how I felt.
Can I just ask, how many people in the audience were at Rethink today? One. Okay. It's interesting because I think this is the 4th or 5th year. I'm not quite sure exactly. This is the 4th year. Okay, the 4th year of Rethink, which for those of you who don't know is Hong Kong's, I guess, largest or only real sustainable. It's not the only one, but the most famous sustainable trade fair at the convention center. I was there for the first one, and we had booths at the second one and the third one. And to see the change in that fair over 4 years, the space that the fair occupies today, the type of exhibitor who has a booth at that fair, I think shows you how small changes can pick up momentum very, very rapidly. I'm not personally convinced that everyone's there for the right reasons, but that's a personal opinion. 4 years ago, I would say every booth in that fair was an SME, and when I say SME, I'm really emphasizing the S in SME. Some people were one-man, two-man teams with little booths trying to get awareness for their business and find clients. I think it's sad that some of those people are no longer there, but I also think it shows how the momentum around sustainability in this city has advanced significantly in the last 4 years. And I think it's an example of how small things can start to become very big, a lot quicker than sometimes we appreciate. Any other questions from the audience? Eugenia?
My question's kind of related to what you just mentioned about the Rethink conference. What are your general thoughts on greenwashing? Like taking Beck's example of how her pet peeve is when companies, reach out to her and want to do something for Earth Day, which is once a year. But is it not an argument to say that that's at least better than nothing and it's a small step somehow?
It's dangerous when it's the only thing that they're doing, and it's giving this idea that we're doing something really great, and on the other hand, everything is business as usual. Like, it's not actually doing anything. And I think that's the thing with greenwashing, is when a lot of money has been thrown at this one green thing that a company is doing, like it's been boosted in marketing and it's been made out to be this really big, incredible thing, and they're a leader in this space when they're just not. I think on the other hand, we need to realize that the change is going to be slow. So it's about looking at these potential greenwashing actions that we're seeing and trying to understand, like, is there a long-term goal to this, or is this just one little thing that they're doing and it's not even like creating a ripple in the pond at all? But then also understanding that some businesses will never be perfect, and that's okay too. Will McDonald's ever become 100% carbon zero? Will they go plant-based? All of this? No, they won't. And there are so many companies in the world that won't. I don't believe that we're going to live in a world where everyone just has a perfectly net zero company. And so I think we do need to acknowledge the small changes that are happening, but just look a bit closer. And I think the consumer is becoming smarter, and people going to work for corporates are they're smarter, they're more onto it and understanding whether it's genuine or not. And again, when it comes to branding, people see through initiatives that aren't genuine, and they won't last. So it's about being genuine.
Yeah, and I think for me, the greenwashing, the real greenwashing challenge comes from the fact that actually sustainability is complicated, right? Let's talk about our lonely office worker bringing in their reusable lunchbox. The elephant in the room is that that's not going to solve the problem, right? The biggest challenge in his or her environment is probably the air conditioning load, right? That's the single biggest probably contributor to the impact around their office environment. And so it's about bridging sort of, again, maybe tangible, smaller actions with, to some extent, lesser understood sustainability or more complex sustainability challenges that may exist in a space. And I explained that that's big in aviation. But the kind of, the rough framework that I always think about in my mind when it comes to communicating is what needs to happen, and I'm not saying I've solved this by any means, but what needs to happen is like, sure, you can engage someone at the level of like, you know, a 5-second like TikTok video that may suggest you're doing something green. But then what you need to do is you need to enable a path to the 5-minute YouTube video that explains it in a little bit more detail, and then enable the path to the sustainability report where you can dig into and scrutinize all the details and be convinced that, you know, whatever is being stated is actually true, right? There's this like line that you need to take, and I think the biggest challenge in communication and greenwashing is that like a lot of brands want to do stuff at the top of that pyramid, right? They want to communicate that they're green, and they want to show the initiatives that they're doing, and they want to engage the customer, and they only have 5 seconds to do it in because that's the world we live in today. But the framework in my head is that you need to kind of make the ability to dig deeper for those who want to dig deeper and understand more. You need to make that happen, right? And that transparency should ultimately hold more companies accountable to what they're actually saying. But it's hard. Yeah.
Maybe one last question if we have one, otherwise we can wrap up.
So we have been talking about, oh, sorry. Yeah, if you want to go for it.
Thank you. Hi. So Terry, I think about greenwashing, transparency and measurability. I think that will be able to avoid any backfire when you're trying to do something good. Because what the biggest enemy or biggest elephant in the room is inactions. So if we don't do anything because we are afraid of being accused as greenwashing, we'll go nowhere. But if everything is transferable, traceable, measurable, then even though we do little things, get rid of 10 packaging, then we are measurable. And for example, McDonald's do have a net zero restaurant. When they are doing all the necessary things to avoid or get rid of one-time disposable packaging, then we should appraise for these actions because they are actually absolutely bring down the waste, and we want to recognize that. I think that's what the world should, because Hong Kong people is very practical, and they see things. You don't bullshit with them. They can see what you are doing. So if this is credible, they buy in. They want to. They can pay more, and absolutely what Slowood is doing. Besides making less waste, your product is good and nice. So that's why people, besides getting that waste, they can enjoy good quality products from your store. I think that's also a very good way to reflect what you have just mentioned, or the panel had just mentioned, the value you are bringing to the customers. Same as Cathay, I think. So more higher price, but even better value. So that is the whole way to get the whole society move on in the right direction. Not everyone is going to move in the right pace. Some will go faster, some will go lower, but we are moving. That is the key.
Yeah, I think I said being genuine was really important, but part of that is measuring and reporting and making it visible and having accountability and you're not perfect, but you are showing that you're improving every year, and that whole transparency is what really makes a difference. Yeah, I agree.
Did you want to ask a question before we wrap? No, you good?
Yeah, I just wanted to say, please, no zero waste, right? Like we said, zero waste. So please enjoy the food. Do not waste it. And you can end it off, and just want to remind everybody to eat. That's all.
Thank you.
Can I just say thank you to all of you for coming? I really appreciate that. To the panel, you guys have been brilliant. It's I've been sitting here thinking about how to sort of summarize what was said, and it's not easy because what's really clear is that this is a very, very complicated topic with a lot of nuances. We talked about top-down, we talked about bottom-up, we talked about the person in the middle. We talked about, whether sustainability was too expensive, and then we said people are happy to pay more for a brand. It's a complicated topic, and we're all on a journey. And I just would like to say that I think we need to continue on that journey, and that small steps matter. That's very obvious. I don't know if I've missed anything there. I think future-proofing your business is one thing that I would take away from this, that if you're not on this journey, then long-term you're going to become irrelevant to your customer, and irrelevant to the employee base that you're trying to bring into your organization. Is there anything any of you guys would like to add before we wrap up? Okay. Well, thank you again, everyone. Thank you to 1880 for hosting us tonight and for the wonderful food and drinks. And I guess let's make sure there's no waste.
Thank you.
Thank you.